Welcome, everyone. My name is Terry Muir, and I'm the director here at Sustainable Kashi. We are proud to provide this class for you every week to help us all connect to our ecosystem and each other. You can feel free to learn more about our project at sustainablekashi.com. Today, we are really excited. This is just a wonderful day for me because we're introducing Joe Pierce. Joe Pierce has been practicing and teaching permaculture since 2009. He was actually in my permaculture design course, which was really exciting. It's where I met him with Bradford White so many years ago. He's the owner of Mosswood Farm Stores and Bakehouse in Micanopy, Florida. And he and his wife run a coffee shop and organic sourdough bakery with a 2-acre permaculture demonstration site and plant nursery. His breads are amazing. His site is just impressive. If you ever get through Micanopy, do yourself a favor and stop in. We're really glad to have him in our Florida community. His passion is collecting and trialing banana varieties up in what we call the frosty north of Florida. And he just got a wonderful experience of that this last couple days. So he focuses on soil building, rainwater harvesting, pretty much all things permaculture. He's kind of the biochar king, the banana king. He's kind of the king of many things. So very blessed to have Joe here with us today. So I'm really excited to talk nanners with you today, Joe.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me. That was a great introduction. They saved me about 10 minutes of, of this introduction for myself, but yeah, you hit it right on the head. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Sounds like we got a really good group, which is evident by the amount of interest that I've found coming up lately in bananas and growing bananas, backyard hobby bananas. Like you said in the introduction, it has become a passion of mine. I've possibly even an obsession of mine, kind of spend a lot of time reading and growing and learning as much as I can about bananas because it is such a deep rabbit hole of information. You can spend an entire lifetime studying bananas just like permaculture and barely scratch the surface. But they are really incredible plants. They are very rewarding plants to grow. Obviously have been around for a very long time. You know, the whole monkey with the banana kind of cliche goes back pretty far as humans interacting with bananas. It may possibly be the first cultivated plant. There is evidence that bananas were being cultivated, and that's about 1,000 to 1,500 years in Mesopotamia. So it is possibly one of the oldest plant relationships that humans have as far as cultivation is concerned, carrying it around, planting it wherever, you know, the hunter-gatherers were to regular and frequent, they would probably take along and plant bananas. Historically speaking, the first inhabitants of Hawaii brought bananas along with them, where a lot of the information about banana cultivation has been kind of concentrated because it is an island, and it was the first food crop that actually made it to the island because of its transportability. One of the amazing things about bananas is that they are salt tolerant, they are heat tolerant. The plant itself can withstand a lot of abuse out of the ground. You can dig up a pup, and with proper storage, it can last very much like a potato for months and months before being replanted and will remain viable. So the Polynesians, as they were island hopping towards Hawaii, were carrying bananas along with them, as well as probably bamboo and taro and breadfruit were some of the first food crops that made it. But their religion is based around the first act of their gods. Upon arrival to the island of Hawaii, they planted 3 varieties of bananas. So in Hawaii in particular, there is a very long-standing kind of religious connection to bananas. besides it being an incredible plant for food production. Obviously, it has many other uses. That is thatching for houses, clothing, medicine, waterproofing. It has a latex type sap that they used for waterproofing canoes and clothing. Medicinal value in the sap, in the nectar. Like you said earlier, the itch relief from the inside of the banana peels. I've recently found out that there is a group in Costa Rica that is making vegan bacon from dehydrated, seasoned banana peels. So if you think about seasoning a banana peel and then smoking it and dehydrating it, you get a crispy, flavored, highly rich in potassium, very nutritious meat alternative kind of thing. Also, they've been grown for animal fodder. The entire plant is basically edible. There are no toxins that I'm aware of, particularly in the edible varieties, but there are thousands, literally, of varieties of bananas worldwide, and we tend to see one in the grocery store that is, by my stretch of the thinking, is one of the more inferior flavored bananas that there is to have. But that is because of its ability to be harvested early and transported for long periods of time without ripening too quickly. And things like that. So we've chosen the Cavendish, which is not a hybrid, which most people think. Cavendish is a landrace variety that has been around for thousands of years. It is originated in China, and there are a few varieties. There is a family of Cavendish for bananas. There is not just one. Chiquita banana is not actually the name of the banana. That's the name of the brand. Chiquita bananas are Cavendish of the Valerie and Grand Nain types. There are also Williams Cavendish. There are Chinese Cavendish. There are dwarf Cavendishes, a Chinese, and then there's truly tiny, which is a super dwarf Cavendish. All have similar flavored fruit, but they're all of different sizes. The Williams is a large variety. I'm still getting into growing Grand Nain. And Valerie is new to my collection, but I do have the Chinese, which is the dwarf Cavendish, and it is a very productive banana, and it's really good for my area. Produces fairly well in a short period of time, and I'm much further north than a lot of folks, I'm sure, that are viewing this. So I'm on the line of 9A, 9B, Alachua County, Marion County border. So like Terry said in the introduction, I experienced about 4 or 5 hours of below 30 degrees night before last. So I took a pretty good hit. But one of the common misconceptions with bananas is that frost kills them. That is not the case. I have seen bananas growing as far north as Virginia outside that get buried in snow every year, and they grow back just fine come springtime. They are probably not getting fruit production off of those bananas because either they are not trying to because they don't think that they can, and or they're using a variety that is, not really for fruit and it's just ornamental. So that's the way that I see most of them growing north. I think the furthest north I've seen fruiting bananas is central Alabama, but that area gets snow, and without covering those bananas, they grow back in fruit the following spring. So it is possible and should be tried and trialed as far north as humanly interested. If you are interested in growing bananas, and I follow people on Facebook that are growing bananas in New Jersey, Ohio, they dig them up and put them under their house or in their garage throughout the winter. And in most cases, they probably don't need to. We put a lot more worry and work into protecting perennial plants, especially tender herbs like the banana is the world's largest herb. So freezing temperatures destroys the cell structure, and they do melt. And they look awful for a few months every year. I have to say that when I started growing bananas, which has been intensively for about 5 years now, about the third year in, I had 25 degrees for a couple of hours on March 17th of 2018, which is basically springtime. And all of the plants thought that it was springtime. It had been a warm January and February with no real cold whatsoever. And then March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, I called it the St. Patty's Day Massacre. I had the worst frost damage in my experience of growing bananas. Every banana plant that I had was frostbit to about 6 feet off the ground. That's all the leaves, all the fruit, and part of the crown of the trunk was frost damage. And I said to myself, I should probably not be growing bananas at that point. I took a little bit of doubt with that particular episode. Cut all of the damaged material off. 3 months later, you could not tell it had happened. They grow back so fast. And because they are a mat, whereas a stand of bananas is one plant technically connected at the roots, it has one massive root ball that we call a mat. And it is all connected underground there. So it has the energy of whatever was above ground before the cold to provide to replace that stand very rapidly. So they do grow back very quickly after frost damage, depending on how late, of course, your frost is. And depending on the variety that you're growing, some are definitely more cold sensitive than others and do not recover from hard freeze like most others. A good example of that is the Rojo, the red, Cuban red is what it's most commonly known as, which is one of the taller red varieties. It's an all red stem, red fruit, different shades of color. That one, if it takes a hard freeze, it gets some sort of a fungus and it rots the stalk away. So the mother plant that would have been the oldest and the most likely to fruit that following year does not recover. However, the pups do not get frost damage because they're protected by the taller mother. So the taller mother takes the hit, and then the pups are able to take its place the following year. With the Rojo, it takes 2 years of constant growth. Here, I periodically get these freezes that sets them back. It took me 5 years to get fruit off of a Rojo here because of frosts, but I finally did. So it does work if you have patience and want to experiment. Eric Tonesmeyer says you plant plants in 3 different places in 3 different mindsets. And if they die in all 3 different cases, then you can give up on that plant. Otherwise, you have to try it in 3 different spots with 3 different mindsets and hope for the best. And if you've given that much effort to it and it doesn't work out, you have my permission to give up. But other than that, I was told I should not grow bananas in this neck of the woods and that I was crazy for doing so. And I don't like it when people tell me that I can't do something. So I tried. And it's working out really well. I harvested over a ton, that is 2,200 pounds of fruit this year off of a little over an acre. That's maybe 50 to 60 plantings, and they are not all mature. And I have another acre to plant. So I have lots of room to expand, and I could grow lots more than I am already. The particular piece of property that I'm working with, I should describe to you because it is unique in that it is a low-lying, extremely rich, old swamp land, lowland, very wet. We have a lot of clay in this area. We have a lot of lakes in this area, which in turn create a lot of standing water. And it's also a low-lying area that was swamped out from drainage issues for many years. So it has what most people would consider like a peaty sort of a bog nature to it, which is perfect for bananas because they love water and they love rich, nutrient-dense soil, which this is. Whereas a lot of plants can't grow in this kind of a soil. It's too wet, it's too boggy. Bananas can stand standing water for up to 2 weeks and survive that. Whereas a week of standing water around a stone fruit, a peach or a plum, it's gonna die. There's just no way around that. So I picked a piece of property that was conducive to growing this particular crop because when I found this piece of property, there were already healthy bananas growing here. They were the Orinoco variety of bananas. And if anyone is not familiar with that variety, if your neighbor has a banana growing in their backyard, pretty much anywhere in Southeast United States, and they said it was there when I moved in, I have no idea what it is. It doesn't taste all that great, but it produces, it's probably an Orinoco. It is one of the most hardy and common bananas that I have come across. Every time someone asks me a question about a banana that they don't know what it is and it was in their yard, it's an Orinoco. Unless that's in South Florida. That changes once you get south of Orlando because there's a lot more variety and a lot more history with growing bananas in South Florida. So up here, it's very unknown, very few varieties been grown for very long. I have now about 38 varieties in my collection and about 10 on my wish list that I will be getting come springtime next year. And I've had 25 or more of those fruit for me here. I have about 10 that I'll mention at the end of the conversation here that I think are the best for me and for Florida, flavor-wise, production, so on and so forth. But just one thing to keep in mind is that bananas are perennial and they can take kind of neglect. You don't have to take as much care of them as you do, annual vegetables or other kinds of herbs. They do produce better when you do, but you can leave them alone and they will pretty much do their thing. I follow a guy in South Florida. He says he doesn't do anything but mulch his bananas and he gets production. One of the modes of thinking behind that is that the less water and fertilizer you give them, the more flavor concentration you get in the fruit. Wild fruit that's grown in woodland areas tends to have a higher Brix content, which is more sugars, which makes them spoil faster. Hence, we don't have those wild fruits in the grocery store. That's a lower sugar content foods store better and ship better and things like that. That's why the nutritional value and the sugar content in most of the foods that we get in the grocery store is so poor. So growing them with very little care, you're not going to get as much fruit, but the quality of the fruit, in some folks' opinions, is better. The flavor is better. Things like that. I'm about in the middle myself. I like to do a low input system where my banana garden is as much of a garden as it is a production farm type of a thing. So I find this happy medium in there where I don't do as much work as, say, a banana farmer would do, but I do more work than a permaculture hammock gardener would do, sort of thing. For everybody, it's different. So you put as much maintenance into it as you want. I know certain banana farmers that go out every day, and if there's a yellow leaf, if there's a hanging leaf, they cut it, they remove it. That takes me into the idea of fertilization and maintenance. I was talking about mulching is something that is about a bare minimum of input to do for them. I've seen them planted in grass in people's lawns in Florida, and they will produce and they will do fine there. Probably not as much as they would if you mulch them. And then a step further, not as much as they would if you mulched and fertilized them. Mulched and fertilized and watered them. They're going to grow faster. They're going to produce more. So because I'm trying to get an income off of my particular operation, it's not just a backyard hobby. I'd like to get some income from it. I fertilize, all organic, all local. And what I like to say about bananas is that they're hungry, but they're not picky. So you can feed them just about anything, and it doesn't necessarily have to be really well decomposed. You can use raw wood mulch, you can use fresh grass clippings, you can use bags of leaves, you can use chicken manure, you can use bat guano. And if it's an established stand of bananas, you're going to have a hard time overdosing it with fertilizer. It's almost impossible to overwater a banana. So things like that are something to take into consideration. When it comes to permaculturalists, we tend to like to chop and drop things. And I was that way for the first 5-6 years of my banana cultivation. But now that we've had a few very warm winters, I am now seeing some diseases that I'd never seen before. And those diseases proliferate in decomposing banana material. So if you have a banana that has a disease and you take some of that plant material off of that banana and you chop it up and lay it on the ground at the base of that banana, you are increasing the viability of that particular disease. You are giving it a place to live. One of the most common banana diseases, and I'm sure some of you folks in South Florida are more familiar with others, but the most common that I think is fairly well known is black sigatoka, which is a fungal infection that affects mostly Cavendish varieties. Unfortunately, for Cavendish varieties, them in monocultures, they might take a big hit in the future. There has been threat to Cavendish varieties because of a fusarium wilt that started in China that has now been discovered in South America. And so they are saying that bananas worldwide, cultivation of bananas worldwide may be at risk. We have lost banana cultivars in the past to production because of situations like this. Before the Cavendish, Grand Nain was the popular variety worldwide. The Gros Michel was the most popular banana grown worldwide in the 1800s. It got taken out. It is not extinct, but it stopped being used in production because of its. We've got this T4, this tropical fusarium, that's the Cavendish varieties. Now, the information that I've read is that it affects 80% of bananas. That's not just Cavendish varieties. That's 80% of bananas. But like I said before, there could be 1,000 varieties of edible bananas worldwide. So there's still 20% that are not going to be affected by this disease. And one of the benefits to growing them in the north, like I am, is that these are tropical diseases. I'm in the subtropics. So having a hard freeze like I had night before last is probably going to do in most of these tropical diseases, at least for a period of time. So I get kind of a reset from the issue of disease. But what I was saying about the black sigatoga being the most common affects Cavendish, I have recently gotten Cavendish into my collection, and I have found Sigatoga is now growing in my garden, on mostly affecting my Cavendish varieties. Now, there are other varieties that do not seem to be affected by it at all, which are fairly common and, in my opinion, are better than the Cavendish. So I'm not too worried about them, but I will stop, and I have stopped chopping and dropping my infected material in my garden. So there are a couple of things that you can do for that, but the idea is to get it off of the land, get that infected material off of the land and destroyed in a way that is not at risk to your bananas or anyone else's bananas. In Hawaii, it's such an issue that they bag and dump their infected banana material. They put it in a plastic bag and send it to the landfill. I can't do that. I won't do that. So what I'm doing is I'm giving it to my friends who have goats, and they eat the infected material, and their digestive system breaks down the fungus. But I am removing it from the property, and I am not composting it on the property. And you don't want to compost it in any way that compost will end up back into your system, because even if it's broken down and biodegraded, that fungus could still be harbored in healthy compost. There could be a thermophilic cycle that could break down the fungal infection from the leaves. I'm not aware of that as of yet, but fungus seems to be able to take composting fairly well. I mean, they're a very fungal rich system, and when you're doing healthy compost. So I would not say that it is 100% safe to compost infected material and then put it back on bananas. You can put it into another garden, an annual vegetable garden that is not going to be susceptible to those diseases. Is probably much safer, or around fruit trees like stone fruit or something like that. If you move it to another system, you can use it there and it won't be as detrimental. Somebody had a question about organic material. I saw kind of run across the screen there. Like I said, all organic material is great for bananas. It doesn't have to be well broken down. You can mound up at the base of a banana. You can bury the trunk and it will grow advantageous roots out of the trunk, and it will feed on the surface. They feed within about a 30-foot diameter, so 15-foot radius. So that's a very large feeding footprint. Yeah, just throw pieces of old trunk as long as they're not diseased. And that is a possibility to become a vector for disease. So like I said, especially in the tropics, chopping and dropping bananas on bananas is probably not the best long-term practice. I call it bananabalism because I did it for a long time. I was getting crates of rotten bananas from the dumpsters and dumping, rotten, bruised, spoiled bananas on the ground at the base of my bananas. And that works. That's a huge amount of fertilizer. It is exactly what they need. But those were commercial bananas that had probably been sprayed with something, and they didn't have the diseases on them that the tissue might actually have. So I don't, steer away from using that material somewhere. I just steer away from using that material on your bananas. Get grass and other stuff for your bananas, wood mulch, get those things for your bananas. Take your banana organic matter somewhere else. With that said, they are an incredible biomass producer. If anyone's familiar with Ernst Ghosh in Brazil, who does the centropic farming, he grows bananas as much for biomass and green manure as he does for anything else. And I will say that I'm pretty sure he chops and drops his bananas on his bananas. So if you have a really healthy system, you may have something in there that's going to outcompete your diseases and things like that. But also, he's not just relying on his bananas. He's got cacao, and he's got mangoes, and he's got papayas, and he's got everything else in that system that he's also getting inputs, or he's getting exports out of. So he has sale products that are not just the banana. So if he does get some banana disease, it's not the worst thing in the world. So I have discovered that they are really great for creating biomass, for creating mulch. And with that said, that's also animal fodder. If you have goats in particular, goats absolutely will eat the entire banana plant, flower, stem, the bitter parts that we don't like, they'll eat it all. Chickens will eat the flowers that fall off of the bud. They will eat the center of that flower bud. They will eat the center core of the trunk of the tree. So I usually lay mine down, cut it in half, lay it open, and there's like a celery textured core to the center of that. And the chickens will just trough that out and they'll eat the whole thing. And so I move my trunks into my chicken coop, the chickens break it down in the chicken coop, and then that's mulch in my greenhouse where I don't have bananas. So I'm moving the stuff around to try and eliminate the vectors for diseases and things like that. Let's see, what else? Thinking about other food products. Oh, and other uses besides animal fodder. Obviously, I mentioned earlier the clothing. They would roll canoes on the trunks down the mountainside in Hawaii. They would use them for rollers. There's a variety that's grown specifically for making beer, for fermentation. Banana vinegar is very popular in the Philippines. And basically all you do is put a couple of overripe bananas in a glass jar with the lid on for a couple of weeks, and it ferments and turns into banana vinegar. And it's actually pretty flavorful, really good for salad dressings and things like that. And then like textiles and things like that. Yeah, banana liquor. So I've fermented and made banana mead, where we mixed honey and mashed bananas together. All of those things are doable. Anything that has sugar in it obviously can be fermented. Banana chips, obviously, banana flour from green bananas. If you ever have a banana fall over, you can dehydrate green bananas, powder that, and make a gluten-free bread substitute. I mean, the list goes on and on. You could literally live off of bananas. There's enough variety.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of protein in there, but you can get the vast majority of your needs, daily needs, met from bananas alone. And that has been done in many countries all over the world for very long periods of time. They are staple crops in many countries, particularly island countries. So I guess the next step, I'll go into some of the varieties that I have here. I guess I could just go over the list really quickly. I have them all written down here. Like I said earlier, Orinoco is a very popular banana, but it is in a greater family as well. It's called the Blugo family. In the Blugo family, one of the members of it is very well known, but is in very much a state of confusion. And I want to cover this particular variety because of this state of confusion, but it'll be in the next one. So the Orinoco is also known as the burro banana or square cooker. It is technically a plantain. But the technicality of that is whether you prefer it cooked or raw. Worldwide, there's really no distinction between bananas and plantains, except for do you prefer it eaten raw or do you prefer it cooked? The interesting thing about it is that there is a small family of what we call true plantains, and they have a different growth structure to them, but they are technically bananas, and some of them are eaten raw. Yeah, thinning the stand always helps. So the Orinoco, in my particular taste, I prefer cooked. I prefer it cooked ripe, which would be like not tostones, but maduros, right? So you got the sweet fried plantain, or you've got the green fried plantain, which would be the tostones, or twice fried. And it works great to people who know that it was considered a plantain and had been eating it as a banana because it is tasty when it's completely ripe. It has a little bit of a fluff to it. It gets a little soft for me, so it depends on your particular flavor profile preferences. If you like a firmer, greener banana kind of flavor, if you're considering like eating it from the grocery store, if I was to pick up a grocery store banana, if it's got a black spot on it, I am not touching it. It is not a good banana in my taste at that point. It has to be green on the tip and the stem for me to really enjoy a grocery store banana. And once it gets past that stage, I'm not a big fan. So the Orinoco, when it gets really completely ripe, it gets pretty mushy. But if you cook it at that stage, it firms up and it's delicious, in my opinion. That's the way I like that one. So in that family of the bluego, there is Orinoco, there is silver bluego Java, which is also called fusion in the banana world, and particularly in Florida. I think because the original mistake happened in Florida, is that the real ice cream banana, aka blue Java, which is the more correct term, is in the bluego family and is considered a cooking banana where it comes from in the Philippines. Ash plantain is another name for it. And it is cold hardy, but it is not as cold hardy as some of the other more mistakenly called ice cream bananas that we'll get to next. One of the things that I know about this is that it has a much smaller window of good ripe eating, meaning that once it turns yellow, it gets to a mushy and overripe stage in a few days. When it is perfectly ripe and just yellow without any black on it, it is a decent eating banana raw. But then 2 or 3 days after that, it disintegrates quickly and gets very soft and should be cooked with. The Namwa and Pisang Awak, AWAK bananas are commonly called and mistaken for ice cream bananas. So if you have an ice cream that you got from somebody that bought it from a nursery in Florida, it is most likely Pisang Awak or Namwa banana. If you have a true blue Java, it is going to be a taller and skinnier plant, and it is going to make smaller rags, and they are going to be a little bit more square, and it will have a distinct blue hue to the fruit when it is immature, as in still green. The Namwa, on the other hand, has a bit of a waxy color to it that gives it a bit of a blue hue, one of the reasons for the confusion, but it is a dessert banana. It is not one that you would want to cook with because there's no reason to cook it because it tastes so good when it is completely ripe and yellow. And from ripeness, 2 weeks on, it is still firm and just gets sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. It can be almost black on the outside and it will still be firm and sweet on the inside. And it has a mild vanilla flavor to it. So the ice cream identification is commonly confused because it has more characteristics of ice cream than the true blue Java ice cream banana does. And because of that, 25, 30 some odd years ago, there was a mistake in a large nursery in Florida that let out a bunch of Pisang Awak Namwa bananas labeled ice cream. And so there has been confusion, and it's still confusion. I argue with people about it constantly on the banana forums that what they have is Namwa and not ice cream. I honestly have never eaten a true ice cream banana. I've been doing this for as long as I have. I have been getting to be blue Java ice cream, and every time they turn out to be Pisang Awak, blue Java. Sorry, Namwa, and I already had that in my collection. So I have no true ice cream bananas in my collection as of yet. But from what I've found and everyone that I've talked to, the reason for them being more popular is because they are better, by far better eating banana, and productive wise, as far as I can tell as well. One of the cool things about the Pisang Awak Namwa is that there is a tall variety and there is a dwarf variety. In the blue Java is a medium-sized plant, 10, 12 foot. The dwarf Namwa is only about 8 or 9 feet, and the tall Namwa or Pisang Awak is about 15 to 16 feet. So you've got 3 different structures there. And the dwarf Namwa is by far the most productive, easiest to grow, and delicious banana I have ever had. It was the first that I was given as far as a homegrown banana in 2008 when I took my PDC before I met Terry. One of the instructors is a local fellow by the name of Oliver Moore, who is a fruit enthusiast, was growing what he calls and still calls ice cream bananas, and they are not. It is Pisang Awak. He gave me one, and it was the most delicious thing I'd ever eaten banana-wise at that point. And so I immediately got a plant from him. And of course, one plant turns into 10 plants if you do it right. And so that was the first of my collection. And that plant literally flowers out at about 7 feet tall. And then the leaves can be up to about 9, but you can harvest that rack standing flat footed. The trunk is over 12 inches in diameter in some cases, only 9 feet tall. It needs no support whatsoever. I've never had a tree fall over from weight. A lot of other varieties I'll cover later fall over from weight if you don't support them with some sort of a crutch, or there's ways to prune your banana trees, plants, herbs to where they will fruit at a shorter height than their mature height, but that's a little complicated, but it is possible. But this one is the easiest by far, dwarf Namwa. And then the taller variety is called Pasang Awak, A-W-A-K, most commonly. If you want to find out information on this sort of thing, there's a couple of books. The Book of Bananas is a Bill Lassard production, and Bill Lassard is a Floridian. He's getting up there in age, but he wrote a book 20 some odd years ago of how to identify bananas. And then there's this book that I recommend anyone getting, and I'll sort of pan over here and show you guys the cover. The World of Bananas in Hawaii, Then and Now, Traditional Pacific and Global Varieties, Cultures, Ornamentals, Health, and Recipes. So this is the most current book for banana information. It is not 100% accurate. We have found some mistakes in this book, but it does a really good job of giving you identifiers. And I'll go into identifiers real quick because I was covering some of the varieties. Identifiers for different varieties. Flower structure. And when I say flower, I don't mean the teardrop shaped bud that comes out. That is what we would call like an inflorescence. That is a conglomeration, a cluster of flowers. So when a banana first starts to flower, the first flowers that come on are female flowers. And those female flowers are already pollinated, even though they're not pollinated. It's hard to explain because we don't have asexual reproduction in bananas anymore because we have isolated bananas that were mutations that came up seedless. So we did not create seedless bananas. We isolated seedless bananas thousands of years ago and reproduced them over and over and over again. And throughout the years, basically every variety of banana has gone seedless at one period of time or another. And we have isolated that and grown it out, and it reproduces seedlessly. So there is very little banana asexual reproduction going on unless you have, I'll cover the book again at the end of the conversation. Unless you have wild varieties that have seeds in them that create male flowers and female flowers, and the male flowers have to have pollen. And so there are wild varieties that still create seed. Most of them are grown as ornamentals these days. And that is the Musa velutina. There are lots of them. The pink fuzzy banana is one of them. Yes, the Book of Bananas, thank you, is the Bill Lassard book. So there is potential to create new varieties of bananas by getting flowers and isolating pollen in wild varieties. But no longer does that happen easily outside of a laboratory or a scientific farm. So what we do now is we dig up pups, and the pups are the asexual reproduction, the vegetative propagation of the stand of bananas. And what you will find is that there are basically two different kinds of pups. One of them is called a sword sucker, and one of them a tall, slender, blade-like leaf on them, where water suckers come up with fully round, mature leaves right out of the ground. They're already, and they don't go through a developmental stage, and the stem tends to be smaller, skinnier, and weaker. You want these sword suckers for propagation. I kind of got off track with my variety, so I'll go back and Brazilian is another great variety that I was gifted originally from Terry Muir at Kashi. Gave me my first Brazilian variety banana. There's a dwarf Brazilian and there is a tall Brazilian, often called apple bananas. Another common misconception, because there is a true apple banana, and the Brazilians are not, and you get an apple banana or Hawaiian apple banana, and Brazilian is in that family. Sorry if I'm cutting out, might have a signal problem. So there's Brazilian and dwarf Brazilian. They have a upright structure, very compact plant. very stout, don't need to be supported, are a little slow growing and slow to produce compared to some of the other varieties that I have, but is definitely doable, and I have gotten it to fruit here. So that means it'll fruit anywhere south of here much easier. So the Pisang Awak and the Dwarf Namois I mentioned before, those are the commonly confused ice cream varieties, which I prefer to the true ice cream blue Java. From what I know, they are better. And from what I've heard, as far as the descriptions are concerned of the flavor of the true blue Java, like I said, I have not tried one. They seem to be superior in storage capability and productivity. The question was, I just saw on the screen about a time of year. Bananas are constantly producing in the tropics where they don't have seasons. They produce once they're mature. So it's the age of the plant. It's not the time of year. So certain plants will fruit in 7 months. Some take 2 years, like I said, with the Rojo. It has to be alive and making leaves for 2 years. Some folks say it's the amount of leaves that they produce. So if they're growing faster and they're being taken care of better, they're going to grow more leaves. They're going to mature faster. If you're not giving them any care, they can grow very slowly, and it might take 5 years for them to produce 40 leaves and to get to maturity. So it has to do with the development of the plant more than it has to do with anything else. And like I said, there's differences between varieties. 2 years to produce a flower for the Rojo, as little as 7 months for short cycle varieties like Vienti Kohal and Patupi, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I covered the Pisang Awak and the Dwarf Namois, very great varieties. Another one that's one of my new favorites is the Iholines. Iholine is a Hawaiian variety. It's one of their oldest landrace varieties, been grown on the islands for thousands of years, probably came from Papua New Guinea originally. It's a beautiful plant. There is a red Iholine, there is a white Iholine, and there is a dwarf Iholine, and there's probably a few more that are a little harder to find. The red Iholine has a copper color on the backside of the leaf and has pink margins on the petioles, which are the stems of the leaf. So there's a lot of different ornamental potential for a lot of these as well. They make really delicious bananas that when they're completely ripe, they have a bit of a pink hue to the skin. So it's a yellow with a pink sort of a splash on the skin, and a deep orange fleshed banana that has tropical notes of orange, pina colada, all kinds of incredible flavors. The pink fuzzy is Musa velutina, which is a wild ornamental variety. That was a question on my screen. Sorry about that. So then we get into Mysore and Pisang Ceylon, which a lot of folks think are basically the same. There could be that they were originally the same, and that the Pisang Ceylon is a more robust sport. So a lot of varieties, like with variegated bananas in particular, is a mutation that is able to be isolated and then replicated. So at one time, a banana decided, I'm going to go variegated, and it sent out a beautiful little pup that had white streaks in the leaves. Somebody dug that up and moved it, and then grew that stand out, and that stand continued to grow variegated fruit. Or plants, and also fruit, where it's got the stripes on the side. So there's a lot of genetic variation that can come up in a given stand. And so we call it a sport. So it'll throw off a sport. Almost out of time. Wow, that was quick. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just run through these varieties that I think are the best and that I've gotten really good production off of in this area. Mysore and Pisang Ceylon. Sabah, Praying Hands, and Cardaba are plantain red. I've gotten to produce here. Does better in South Florida. The Manzano is the true apple. Very delicious banana, very productive. Kandarian and me are East African highlands plantains, huge plants, plantain type fruit. They're good specimens, but they're giant. They're hard to harvest, and the fruit's not incredible. African rhino horn plantain, true plantain, 2-foot fruit, delicious. Not so productive and a little disease, prone. Dwarf Puerto Rican plantain, nice short plant, true plantains. Got some colors, some red spots in the leaves. Huamoa plantain is a Hawaiian variety that tastes delicious when it's completely ripe. It makes these giant goose egg, stuffed sausage looking fruits. And I will post all of these on our link, our conversation page, the event page or something like that after all of this. If you guys have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them there as well. Rajapuri, really good producer, delicious fruit, short dwarf plant. dwarf Chinese Cavendish. Vienti Kohal is a really unique little plant that produces in 7 months, can be put in the ground in spring and fruit by like September. It's really fast. Let's see. Mona Lisa, Goldfinger are some of the hybrids. That's FHIA 1 and 3. I'm not so impressed with the hybrids, to be honest with you guys. They come from tissue culture most of the time. Tissue culture is very slow. I'm sorry I took up so much time and I didn't get to cover nearly as much information, but this is a huge subject. I hope you guys are all interested. I'm on Facebook at Joseph Pierce, Instagram, Cyber Joe Daddy. I post pictures. I love to converse about this sort of thing. Hit me up anytime. Like I said, Terry said at the intro, I'm in Micanopy. My garden is open to the public and interest at all times. It's not really pretty right now. Come see us in the springtime. We'll have a big plant sale. All of our bananas will be canned. All right.
I will listen to you talk about bananas
water
all day long, Joe. Thank you so much. You're a
My pleasure.
wealth of knowledge. I actually got my Hawaiian banana from you, and it's doing fantastic here at Kashi.
That's great.
How do you get to Mosswood for anybody who's interested?
So Mosswood Farm Store has a Facebook page, and we have an Instagram page, and we have a website. So most of the garden stuff is really not on those. So getting in touch with me directly is the best place to converse and to find out about the garden. But if you want to know about the bakery and the coffee shop, all that stuff is on the Mosswood Farm Store pages. And I will be having a big plant sale in March, and I will have varieties of bananas, bamboo, gingers, all kinds of stuff for sale, for trade. I'm hoping to have a series of permablitzes starting in January here at the shop, in the garden. Come and learn, work trade, plant trade, stuff like that. Thanks for everybody for coming, for being interested. I hope you got a little bit of decent information out of this, but there's so much to cover. I just couldn't even scratch the surface.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to continue this conversation on the Facebook community page, and we're just going to be going bananas over there for as long as answer all the questions you guys have. So we got quite a few here on the chat that we're going to take over there, so we can all get everybody's questions answered. And we can really just talk about what the biggest takeaways were. I'd love to talk about how to start new banana circles and things like that. So I think there'll be a lot of discussion there. All right. So thank you, Joe, so much. That's fantastic. I want to thank Amy Zelt for doing all of our production on this call. You're wonderful. We couldn't do it without you. If you've gotten anything out of this call, please feel free to donate to us. We have a donation link that we'll post right over below. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. It helps us out, and it's completely free. Next week, we're going to be talking about small spaces with Nikki and Dave Schrouder from Permaculture Gardens. You can go to growyourownfood.com to learn a little bit about their projects. So we're really excited to have them on. I've always loved growing bananas. They don't only look beautiful, but they represent like that tropical oasis. And I love the way they create such a resilient ecosystem below them. The microclimate that surrounds them is this perfect home for plants and animals that wouldn't be there without them. So they're so powerful in their ability to do this. They're such a strong plant. And I like to think that each of us have that same power, and we can create an amazing ecosystem around us, and we can help create a world of abundance and connection together. Hey, thanks everybody for being here, and hopefully we'll see you on the Facebook group. Have a great week. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Terry. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Joe. It's been great having you.
Love you guys.